The year was 1882, and the sun hung mercilessly over Dust Valley like God's own judgment. Mason Stone stood motionless on his porch, Remington revolver steady in his weathered hand. Three men faced him, strangers, with hollow eyes and hands hovering over holstered guns. Vultures circled overhead, as if sensing the blood about to soak into the parched earth. "Last chance," Mason's voice cut through the silence, gravel rough from years of whiskey and desert dust. "Get off my land." The leader, a rat-faced man with yellowed teeth, smirked. "Hammond says this land's changing hands today, Stone." Mason's response was simple. 3 shots, each finding its mark with devastating precision. 2 men fell instantly. The third clutched his shoulder, scrambling toward his horse in panic. Mason pursued, boots kicking up clouds of red dust. As he rounded the bend toward town, fate intervened. There on the outskirts of Dust Valley, an elderly Apache man lay bleeding in the dirt, surrounded by a growing crowd. Their faces twisted with disgust and curiosity, but none offered help. A woman knelt beside the fallen man, her dress worn thin, her auburn hair wild in the hot wind. She was defiant, eyes flashing as she shouted at the gathering mob. "Back away! He needs help, not your hatred." Mason knew that helping would only bring more trouble, but something in the woman's eyes, something in the dignified face of the dying Apache, pulled at something he thought long dead inside him. Mason holstered his Remington and pushed through the crowd. "Get my horse," he commanded the woman, not waiting for a response. "We're taking him to my ranch." As Mason lifted the wounded Apache, he recognized the distinctive markings of a tribal chief. The crowd's murmurs grew hostile. "That's Black Hawk himself," someone spat. "Let him bleed." Mason's eyes, cold as a winter sky, swept over the crowd. "Any man follows us, he'd best bring a coffin with him." The woman climbed onto Mason's horse, and he handed up the wounded chief before mounting behind them. As they rode away, the chief's blood soaked through Mason's shirt, a stain that would forever change his destiny. Back at the ranch, Mason kicked open the door to the spare room. The woman, Rebecca Wells, she'd told him on the ride, quickly gathered supplies. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, revealing her past as a war nurse. "I need whiskey, clean cloths, and a knife," she instructed, rolling up her sleeves. "And light. All the light we can get." Mason studied her face as she worked. "What's a woman like you doing helping an Apache chief?" Rebecca's hands never faltered. "Same reason you are, I expect. Because it's right." Her eyes met his, challenging. "And because I've seen enough death to last several lifetimes." As they worked to remove the bullet from Black Hawk's shoulder, Mason noticed something metallic tucked inside the chief's buckskin shirt. Carefully extracting it, he found a silver plate no larger than his palm, etched with markings that could only be a map. Just then, Black Hawk's eyes fluttered open. His hand, surprisingly strong, gripped Mason's wrist. "Hammond," he whispered, his voice like dry leaves in autumn. "He will kill everyone for this." Rebecca looked up sharply. "Judge Hammond? The banker?" Black Hawk nodded weakly. "Silver, mountains of it, on sacred ground. Our ancestors hid it generations ago." His breath came in painful gasps. "Now he hunts us like animals to find it." Mason's jaw tightened. He knew Hammond, a man who'd built his fortune on others' misfortunes. A man who ruled Dust Valley with money and fear. Before they could question Black Hawk further, hoofbeats approached. Mason moved to the window, rifle in hand. 2 Apache women rode into the yard, tension evident in their posture. The older one, tall and powerful, dismounted with the fluid grace of a warrior. The younger followed, carrying a leather pouch of medicinal herbs. "Get down," Mason warned Rebecca, moving to intercept the visitors. The moment he stepped onto the porch, an arrow whistled past his ear, embedding itself in the wooden post inches from his head. "Where is my father?" The older woman's voice was steel, her bow already knocked with another arrow. "What have you done with him, white man?" Mason raised his hand slowly. "Your father's inside. Took a bullet meant to kill him. The lady and I pulled it out." The younger sister stepped forward, her hand on her sister's arm. "Diana, wait. Look at his shirt. That's father's blood." Diana lowered her bow fractionally, dark eyes assessing Mason with lethal intensity. "If you're lying—" "He's not." Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "Your father is Blackhawk, yes? He's alive but weak. He needs your help." The sisters followed them inside, Diana's suspicion evident in every tense line of her body. The younger one, Ava, rushed to her father's side, immediately examining Rebecca's handiwork with knowing fingers. "You've stopped the bleeding well," she acknowledged, opening her medicine pouch. "These herbs will prevent fever." While Ava tended to her father, Diana remained vigilant, her gaze alternating between Mason and the windows. "Hammond's men will come," she stated flatly. "They always do." As if summoned by her words, dust clouds rose on the horizon. Mason grabbed his rifle and ammunition belt. "Looks like we have company. 5 riders moving fast." He turned to Diana. "How good are you with that bow?" The hint of a smile, fierce and proud, crossed Diana's face. "I never miss." "Good." Mason loaded his rifle with practiced ease. "Rebecca, get Blackhawk and Ava to the cellar. Diana, take the south window. I'll handle the front." The riders approached in a thundering wave, rifles gleaming in the afternoon sun. Mason recognized the lead man, Jenkins, one of Hammond's hired guns. As they reached the fence line, Mason fired a warning shot that kicked up dirt at the lead horse's feet. "That's close enough," he called out. Jenkins reined in his horse. "Stone, hand over the Apache and nobody gets hurt." "Nobody's here but me," Mason replied evenly, "and I'm not in a charitable mood." The first shots came in a deafening volley. Mason ducked as bullets splintered wood around him. From the south window, Diana's arrows found their marks with deadly accuracy. 2 men fell before they could dismount. Mason took careful aim at Jenkins, his bullet finding the man's shoulder. The remaining 2 men retreated, dragging their wounded leader. As the dust settled, Mason turned to find Diana watching him with newfound respect. "You fight well." For a white man. Inside, Blackhawk had regained consciousness. He beckoned Mason closer. "You have protected my family at great cost," the chief said, each word an effort. "Hammond will not stop. The silver map is only complete when joined with its other half, which my people have hidden." Blackhawk looked at his daughters, then back to Mason. "My daughters will stay. Diana's arrows will protect your home. Ava's medicine will heal your wounds. And together, we will keep the sacred silver from Hammond's grasp." Mason looked at Rebecca, who nodded almost imperceptibly. He turned back to Blackhawk. "This isn't just about silver anymore," Mason said quietly. "It's about standing against men like Hammond. I'm in." As night fell over the ranch, 4 unlikely allies prepared for the battle they knew would come with the dawn. The silver map glinted in the lamplight, a treasure worth killing for, buried beneath sacred ground. But for Mason Stone, something far more valuable had been found that day, a purpose beyond mere survival. 3 days passed with an uneasy calm settling over Mason's ranch. Diana patrolled the perimeter relentlessly, her keen eyes scanning the horizon for signs of Hammond's men. Inside, Ava tended to Blackhawk, whose strength returned slowly under her careful ministrations. Rebecca had taken charge of the household, bringing order to Mason's Spartan existence. Mason himself remained vigilant, the weight of the Remington a constant presence against his hip. He knew Hammond wouldn't wait long to make his next move. "I need supplies," he announced over breakfast. "Can't hold a siege without ammunition and food." Diana immediately stood. "I'll go with you." Mason shook his head. "You're needed here. I'll go alone." Rebecca's voice cut through the tension. "No, I'll accompany you. 2 sets of eyes are better than one. Her tone left no room for argument. Before they left, Mason noticed Rebecca placing a faded photograph in her pocket, a handsome man in formal attire. Your husband? He asked quietly. Rebecca nodded. James. He worked for the bank until last year. Fever took him. Something in her eyes suggested there was more to the story, but Mason didn't press. An hour later, they rode into Dust Valley. The town had swollen to twice its size in recent years, the promise of silver-drawing prospectors and opportunists from across the territory. The main street bustled with activity, miners with dust-covered clothes, gamblers in fine suits, women in colorful dresses working the saloons. Mason tied their horses outside the general store. Near the hitching post, he noticed Charlie Winters, a nervous, wiry man who'd once assisted James Wells at the bank. Charlie quickly averted his eyes when he saw Rebecca hurrying away down the boardwalk. Curious, Mason thought, filing the observation away. Inside the storekeeper's welcoming smile vanished upon recognizing Mason. Conversation halted as patrons turned to stare. We need supplies, Mason stated flatly, placing a list on the counter. The storekeeper, Wilkins, glanced nervously at the other customers before responding. Don't want trouble here, Stone. Neither do I, Mason replied evenly. Just filling my order. A heavy hand landed on Mason's shoulder. Well, if it ain't the Apache lover himself. Mason turned slowly to face 3 men, miners by their appearance, with hard eyes and harder fists. Step aside, Mason said quietly. The largest man spat on the floor. Or what? You gonna call your redskin friends? Heard you're keeping a whole tribe at your place now. Mason's hand hadn't moved toward his gun. Last warning. What happened next unfolded with brutal efficiency. The first man lunged. Mason sidestepped, driving his elbow into the man's temple. The second attacker received a devastating uppercut that lifted him off his feet. The third pulled a knife, slashing wildly. Mason caught his wrist, twisted until bones cracked, then slammed the man headfirst into a shelf of canned goods. The entire confrontation lasted less than 15 seconds. Anyone else? Mason asked the silent store. When no one moved, he turned back to Wilkins. My supplies? Outside, loading their purchases, Rebecca studied Mason's face. You've killed men before, not just in the war. It wasn't a question. Mason secured a bag of flour to his saddle. Hammond isn't the first man to want me dead. Sheriff Cole was watching from across the street, Rebecca noted. He made no move to interfere. Marcus Cole and I have history, Mason replied. Served together in the war. Once, he was a good man. And now? Now he's Hammond's dog. As the sun moved westward, casting long shadows across the street, Mason caught Rebecca staring at the bank, at Judge Hammond's office above it. For a moment, raw grief and anger crossed her face before she composed herself. James didn't die of fever, did he? Mason asked quietly. Rebecca's eyes hardened. No. He found something in Hammond's records, something about Apache land rights. The next day, he was dead. Mason nodded once, understanding deepening between them. Both had lost much to Hammond's greed. Both sought justice, not just vengeance. As they prepared to leave town, a commotion drew their attention. Sheriff Cole emerged from his office, escorting a prisoner, a young Apache brave, bloodied and in chains. A crowd gathered, hurling insults at the captive. Diana had described this brave, running fox, one of their tribe's scouts. Mason and Rebecca exchanged glances, understanding passing between them without words. This was a message from Hammond, a warning of what awaited those who defied him. Upon their return to the ranch, Diana received the news of Running Fox's capture with cold fury. Hammond will publicly hang him, she predicted grimly, to break our spirits. That night, Mason found Diana preparing her weapons on the porch, checking her bowstring, sharpening arrowheads with methodical precision. You're planning something foolish, he observed, settling beside her. Diana didn't look up. Running Fox is my blood cousin. I won't leave him to die. Rushing into town alone is suicide. Her dark eyes flashed. What would you have me do? Nothing? Mason checked his Remington, ensuring each chamber was loaded. I'd have you not go alone. Before dawn, Mason, Diana, and Rebecca approached the Dust Valley jail from 3 different directions. The town slept, unaware of the rescue about to unfold. Mason positioned himself on the roof of the livery stable, rifle trained on the jail's entrance. Diana melted into the shadows behind the building, silent as a ghost. Rebecca, dressed as a grieving widow, approached the front door, a basket over her arm. "Sheriff," she called, her voice trembling perfectly. "My husband. There's been an accident at our cabin. Please, I need help." The deputy, young and inexperienced, opened the door. Rebecca's hidden derringer pressed against his ribs before he could react. "Not a sound," she whispered as Diana slipped inside through the rear window. They freed Running Fox without firing a shot, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness with their rescued companion. By sunrise, they were miles from Dust Valley, the Apache scouts safely hidden at Mason's ranch. But their victory was short-lived. That evening, as they shared a rare moment of peace around the dinner table, hoofbeats approached. Mason signaled for silence, moving to the window with his rifle ready. In the fading light, he recognized the rider, Charlie Winters, the bank clerk who'd avoided them in town. Diana caught him trying to flee, dragging him before Mason for questioning. "Hammond sent me to watch," Charlie confessed after minimal persuasion, his eyes darting nervously. "He knows you have Black Hawk in the map. He's offered $5,000 to anyone who brings him both." "What else?" Mason demanded, recognizing the fear in Charlie's eyes. Charlie looked at Rebecca, his face ashen. I was there when James died. It wasn't fever. Hammond discovered he'd found documents about the Apache land and silver deposits. James threatened to contact the territorial governor. His voice dropped to a whisper. Hammond had him poisoned. Made it look like illness. Rebecca's face drained of color, knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. Mason instinctively moved closer, his hand resting briefly, reassuringly on her shoulder. For a moment, she leaned into his touch, a small gesture that spoke volumes. "There's more," Charlie continued. "Hammond's bringing in professional gunmen from Phoenix, 10 of them, arriving on tomorrow's stage." As night fell, Mason gathered his unlikely allies around the kitchen table, outlining their defensive strategy with military precision. Maps were drawn, weapons distributed, roles assigned. The ranch, once just a solitary man's refuge, had transformed into a fortress preparing for war. Just before midnight, they came. Not the expected frontal assault, but a stealthy infiltration from multiple directions. 7 men, moving like shadows toward the darkened house. Mason had anticipated this. Tripwires triggered shotgun blasts that cut down 2 attackers immediately. Diana's arrows found 2 more with lethal accuracy. From an upstairs window, Mason's rifle accounted for another. But 2 made it to the house, breaking through the kitchen door. Rebecca, guarding Black Hawk and Ava, faced a killer for the first time in her life. Her hands shook as she raised James's old shotgun. The intruder lunged. Rebecca pulled both triggers. Afterward, in the blood-soaked quiet, she stood motionless, the smoking shotgun still gripped in white knuckles. Mason gently took the weapon from her trembling hands. "First time's the hardest," he said softly. "You did what you had to do." Rebecca's eyes met his, raw with emotion. "James never fought back." "Maybe if he had..." Mason shook his head. "Don't. That path leads nowhere good." Dawn revealed the cost of their victory. Mason's barn burned to cinders, livestock scattered, and Diana nursing a bullet graze along her ribs. But they had held their ground. The next day, tensions frayed as they argued strategy. Diana wanted to split up. She and her father would lead Hammond's men away, while Mason protected Rebecca and Ava. Divided, we're weaker, Mason insisted. Together, we might stand a chance. Together, we all die when Hammond brings his army, Diana countered, her voice rising. Their argument escalated until Ava, quiet, thoughtful Ava, slammed her mortar and pestle onto the table. Enough! Her voice, rarely raised, silenced them both. Neither plan works. Hammond holds all the power in Dust Valley. We need to take that power away. Her solution was as bold as it was dangerous. Infiltrate Hammond's mansion, find evidence of his crimes, and expose him to the territorial governor, whose monthly visit to Dust Valley was just 2 days away. That night, Mason found himself scaling the ornate trellis outside Hammond's study window, Diana keeping watch below. Inside, he discovered ledgers documenting years of corruption, letters arranging the murders of Apache leaders, and, most damning, correspondence with government officials accepting bribes to turn a blind eye to Hammond's seizure of protected tribal lands. Mason was photographing these documents with a portable camera when the study door opened. Sheriff Marcus Cole stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Always were lousy at sneaking around, Stone, Cole said quietly, his revolver aimed at Mason's chest. Mason straightened slowly. Marcus, you know I have to take you in. Like you took in James Wells, before Hammond had him killed? Something flickered in Cole's eyes. Regret, perhaps. Things are complicated. They're about to get simpler, Mason replied, nodding toward the documents. The governor will find these interesting. Cole's jaw tightened. Hammond owns this town. He owns me. No man owns another unless he chooses to be owned. For a moment, Mason thought his words had reached through years of corruption to the man Cole had once been. Then Hammond's voice boomed from the hallway, and Cole's expression hardened. Sorry, old friend, he said, bringing his gun butt down on Mason's temple. Mason awoke in Hammond's cellar, chained to a support beam. His face was bloody, ribs cracked from the beating Hammond's men had administered while he was unconscious. Through swollen eyes, he made out Cole's figure watching from the shadows. She's pregnant, Cole said abruptly. Mason struggled to focus. What? Rebecca Wells. She's carrying James's child. Hammond doesn't know. Cole stepped closer. I was there when James died. It wasn't fever. Hammond had him poisoned, made me watch to ensure my loyalty. Why are you telling me this? Cole's voice dropped to a whisper. Because I've been Hammond's dog too long, and some debts can only be paid in blood. With that cryptic statement, Cole left Mason alone in the darkness, pain his only companion as he drifted in and out of consciousness, wondering if Rebecca and the others had escaped, or if they too had fallen into Hammond's trap. Dawn broke over Dust Valley with a blood-red sky. Judge Emmett Hammond stood on his veranda, surveying the town he considered his personal kingdom. Beside him, Sheriff Cole maintained his impassive facade, though turmoil churned beneath. Bring Stone to the square at noon, Hammond ordered. Let everyone see what happens to those who harbor enemies of progress. Hammond's plan was simple. Publicly execute Mason, then lead his men to Stone's ranch to capture Black Hawk and seize the silver map. With the territorial governor arriving tomorrow, he needed this problem eliminated quickly. But forces were already in motion beyond Hammond's control. At the ranch, Rebecca refused to accept Mason's capture as final. We're getting him back, she stated, loading her husband's old Winchester. Tonight. Diana shook her head. Hammond will expect that. We attack now in daylight when they least expect it. Black Hawk, stronger now but still weak, offered his wisdom. Neither approach will succeed alone. You need distraction and deception. Their plan formed quickly. Ava prepared a special concoction, Apache smoke medicine, that could render men disoriented without killing them. Diana and her cousin Running Fox would create a distraction at the lumber mill on the edge of town. Meanwhile, Rebecca would approach the jail openly, claiming to surrender herself and reveal Black Hawk's location in exchange for Mason's release. It was desperate, dangerous, and their only hope. As noon approached, Hammond ordered Mason brought to the town square. Beaten and barely conscious, Mason was dragged before the gathering crowd. Hammond addressed the townspeople, painting Mason as a traitor harboring dangerous Apache fugitives who threatened the town's prosperity. "This man chose savages over civilization," Hammond proclaimed. "The penalty for such betrayal is death." From her position near the back of the crowd, Rebecca caught Mason's eye. Despite his injuries, he managed a slight nod, a signal that he understood their plan was in motion. Suddenly, explosions rocked the lumber mill. Black smoke billowed into the sky as flames engulfed the structure. Hammond ordered most of his men to address the emergency, leaving only Cole and 2 deputies guarding Mason. Rebecca made her move, pushing through the crowd. "Judge Hammond," she called out, "I have information about Black Hawk and the silver map." Hammond's attention snapped to her. "Mrs. Wells, how unexpected." "I want Stone released," she demanded. "In exchange for Black Hawk's location." Hammond smiled coldly. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate." "Aren't I?" Rebecca opened her hand, revealing a fragment of the silver map. "This is worthless without knowing where to look. And only I know that now." Hammond's eyes narrowed with naked greed. "Show me." "First, release Mason." "Very well." Hammond conceded with false graciousness. "Sheriff, cut Mr. Stone loose." Cole moved to untie Mason, muttering under his breath, "Be ready." As Cole cut Mason's bonds, Rebecca approached Hammond. The map fragment extended. When Hammond reached for it, she released the powder Ava had prepared, directly into his face. Hammond staggered back, coughing and disoriented. Rebecca drew her concealed derringer, aiming it at the nearest deputy. Simultaneously, Cole's revolver swung toward Hammond's second man. "Drop it," Cole ordered, his badge catching the sunlight. "Now!" The shocked deputy complied as Mason, despite his injuries, disarmed Hammond. "What is the meaning of this?" Hammond sputtered, eyes watering from Ava's powder. Cole addressed the gathering townspeople. "Judge Emmett Hammond, you're under arrest for the murder of James Wells, conspiracy against the United States government, and numerous crimes against the Apache people." From inside his jacket, Cole produced the documents Mason had discovered, evidence of Hammond's decades of corruption and murder. "These will be presented to the territorial governor tomorrow," Cole continued, "along with my full testimony." Hammond's face contorted with rage. "You treasonous dog! I made you!" "No," Cole replied quietly. "You unmade me." Stone reminded me of who I once was. Hammond, desperate, lunged for Cole's gun. The sheriff's reflexes weren't fast enough. Hammond seized the weapon, swinging it toward Mason. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Hammond collapsed, blood blooming on his chest from both bullets, one from Diana's bow position on the church roof, the other from Rebecca's smoking derringer. The town square erupted in chaos. Hammond's remaining loyalists moved to attack, but found themselves outnumbered as townspeople, long oppressed by Hammond's tyranny, sided with Mason and Cole. In the confusion, Hammond, mortally wounded but still dangerous, dragged himself up and raised his gun one final time, aiming at Rebecca. Cole saw it happening, throwing himself into the bullet's path without hesitation. As Hammond collapsed, truly dead this time, Cole lay bleeding in Mason's arms. "Guess I finally did something right," Cole gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. Mason gripped his old friend's hand. "You always were a better man than you believed." Cole's eyes, growing distant, focused on Rebecca. "I couldn't save your husband. I'm sorry." "You helped to save his child," Rebecca replied softly, placing her hand over her belly. "That's enough." With a final nod of understanding, Marcus Cole, once a good man, then a corrupt one, and finally a hero, closed his eyes for the last time. The aftermath unfolded over several weeks. Hammond's empire collapsed as his crimes came to light. The territorial governor, arriving the next day, found a town in transformation. With Cole gone, Mason was appointed temporary sheriff until elections could be held. At the ranch, Blackhawk presided over a healing ceremony for Mason's injuries. Apache medicine combined with Rebecca's nursing skills gradually restored his strength. During his recovery, Mason and Rebecca spent many evenings on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in golden hues, sharing quiet conversations that slowly bridged the space between them. One evening, as they sat side by side, Mason found the courage to broach what had been unspoken between them. "When this is all over," he said, his voice rough with emotion rarely expressed, "what will you do?" Rebecca gazed at the horizon. "I have a child coming. Need somewhere safe to raise it." "This place is too big for just one man," Mason offered cautiously. In the fading light, Rebecca's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. No more words were needed. Diana, restless spirit that she was, announced her intention to leave. "There's a wider world I need to see," she told Mason one evening. "But this place, these people, will always be my family." Before departing, she took Mason aside. "If you hurt her, I'll put an arrow through your heart, from any distance." Mason nodded, accepting the threat as the expression of care it truly was. Ava chose to remain, establishing a small clinic where she practiced both Apache and Western medicine, becoming a bridge between two worlds. 1 month after Hammond's death, Blackhawk called Mason to a private council. The old chief had recovered his strength, though his wound had left him with a permanent limp. "You have become India, one of the people," Blackhawk said, placing a silver band on Mason's wrist. "This marks you as a friend of the Apache forever." "What about the silver mine?" Mason asked. Blackhawk smiled. "It remains where it has always been, beneath sacred ground, protected by our ancestors. Perhaps one day, when the world is ready, it will be shared, but not today." That evening, Mason found Rebecca on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in hues of gold and crimson. "I've been thinking," he said, leaning against the railing beside her. "This place is too big for just one man." Rebecca glanced at him sideways. "Is that so?" From his pocket, Mason withdrew a simple band of silver, crafted from a small piece of Blackhawk's map, transformed into something new. "I'm not one for fancy words," he said gruffly, "but I'd like to build something here. Something that lasts." Rebecca's eyes glistened in the fading light as she extended her hand. "I'd like that too." 2 months later, Mason stood with Rebecca beside him, her pregnancy now visibly showing beneath her simple wedding dress. The small ceremony performed by the new preacher with Blackhawk offering an Apache blessing united them officially, though their hearts had joined long before. Mason had never expected to find love again after losing his first family. Rebecca had never imagined rebuilding her life after James's murder. Yet here they stood, forging something precious from the ashes of their shared grief. After the wedding, Ava approached them, pressing a small leather pouch into Rebecca's hands. "For the baby," she explained, "a blessing from my people." 3 months later, Mason stood on the ridge overlooking his transformed ranch. New buildings had risen, fields planted, cattle grazing peacefully. Apache families worked alongside settlers, former enemies finding common ground in shared labor and purpose. Rebecca called to him from the porch, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Beside her stood Ava, mixing medicines and Blackhawk, carved walking stick in hand, watching over all with quiet dignity. As Mason turned to join them, movement caught his eye, a distant rider watching from the far ridge. The figure's posture was unmistakable. Diana had returned, accompanied by several Apache warriors. Mason smiled, recognizing that another chapter of their story was about to begin. But as Diana's group approached, Mason noticed another rider, hanging back, a man whose silhouette triggered Mason's instincts. He recognized the stance, the way the stranger sat his horse. One of Hammond's hired guns from Phoenix, the ones who'd never arrived during their confrontation. Mason's hand moved to his Remington, a reminder that peace in the frontier came with eternal vigilance. Hammond was dead, but his legacy of greed and hatred might yet reach beyond the grave. This new threat would need to be faced, but not today. Today was for family. With a silent promise to remain watchful, Mason turned toward home, toward Rebecca and their unborn child, toward the family he'd found when he least expected it. His silver bracelet caught the dying sunlight, a blood debt paid, a new future begun, and the promise of battles yet to come. In the wild frontier, a man's legacy wasn't measured in silver or gold, but in the lives he touched and the bonds he forged through fire and blood. For Mason Stone, once a solitary survivor, that legacy now stretched before him like the endless western horizon, full of both promise and peril, but never again to be faced alone.